Hello guys, Counterfactual History here, and I'm here with 1924B, which is the third and final election of the 1916B timeline, as I call it, where Theodore Roosevelt wins a third term in 1912 and then proceeds to lose the 1916 election to William Jennings Bryan, who himself then loses re-election in 1920 to Leonard Wood, and in this final election, Leonard Wood is running for re-election. The previous 3 videos in this timeline, I have done the canon route, so I'll be continuing that, or the previous 2 videos in this, playthrough. I've done the canon route, so we're going to do that here as well to try and get Leonard Wood reelected. Apparently there's been 4 years of relative tranquility and economic renewal under, Leonard Wood, and James A. Reed of Missouri is challenging, Wood, though Reed is apparently a firebrand segregationist and just not that popular. So this should apparently be a kind of a breeze for Leonard Wood. So yeah, few incumbent presidents have ended their first term in more favorable conditions than Leonard Wood. The abatement of Bolshevik advances overseas, which was a big thing in the 1920B election, where basically the Soviets tried to invade all of Eastern Europe. Reduced incidents of disorder at home and a robust economic recovery. Govern the nation in a mostly orthodox manner, enacting austerity measures, tax cuts, and tariff increases without caving to conservative interests on workers' protections established by his 2 predecessors, because Roosevelt and Bryan were both very progressive. Important caveats to Wood's pattern of conventional leadership are related to the issues of foreign policy and civil rights. The creation of the Quintet Act of 1922 tied America to its first peacetime foreign alliance, and the passage of the Dyer anti-lynching bill in 1923 aggravated segregationists of all stripes. So apparently these ultimately improved Wood's chances of re-election because they led the Democrats to nominate divisive Missouri Senator James A. Reed. So yeah, wild firebrand, ardent isolationist, and segregationist. So he's just not a good candidate to be running against Leonard Wood, but luckily we don't have to play Reed yet. That'll come in a later video. Now, Herbert Hoover is the canonical vice president of Leonard Wood, so we're going to be playing him. He's a popular incumbent vice president who proved himself a capable campaigner. He's improving our performance in Iowa and the Great Plains region, and is good at selling our agenda to the public, and has a good reputation within the national business community because he himself was kind of a businessman before he entered politics. Actually, one of the few, what I'd consider to be good businessmen. He used a lot of his wealth to fund humanitarian things. Like he did a big humanitarian effort in Belgium, so I know Belgium loves him. Which I think is kind of something that gets overlooked with Herbert Hoover is he was obviously our president during the Great Depression, so a lot of people don't like him. And I'm not going to argue that he was a good president because he screwed up a lot historically. But I would argue that he was probably a good person overall. Anyway, yeah, here he's a boon to our campaign. So let's see. So I know I've played through this twice before. I never really finished because I start losing so bad. So hopefully this time is the third time's a charm. But yeah, we do little flashbacks to his term and we get to decide his presidential courses of action. However, I'm going to be trying to govern things in a way that seems consistent with the canon established in the summary. Anyway, April 16th, 1921, peace at last. After almost 9 months of inconclusive fighting, German Chancellor Joseph Wirth and Soviet Commissar for Foreign Affairs Georgy Chicherin have finalized a peace settlement at the Italian Riviera town of Rapallo. This stunning agreement maintains a Polish buffer state under German, authority, I guess, or protection, while nullifying Berlin's stewardship over Belarusia, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. So yeah, big thing in the 1920B election is that the Soviets, like I said, invade Eastern Europe. Germany was the main country to stand up to them, so that was a big war going on. So, let's see. With Germany at peace, it is finally time to inoculate Europe against future bouts of Bolshevism. Surely more cooperation in the realm of security is required to protect the greater democracies of the West from Lenin's disease. Don't think we're going to do that one. While America does seem a little bit more internationalist in this timeline because of Leonard Wood and, how aggressive Bolshevism seems to be, it's not that internationalist yet. I commend the German people for successfully fending off the Red Colossus. Our provision of arms and ammunition certainly helped bring about this positive outcome. So yeah, we must have donated arms and ammunition. So that could be a definite positive one, is pointing out hey, we helped. That would probably be a good option. We could just commend them and say that their grit and valor should inspire us all. That one's kind of just a non-political response, where I feel like we could definitely politicize this. While it is relieving to see this conflict reach its conclusion, the extent of worse territorial concessions are concerning, to say the least. We must slow the expansion of the Soviet behemoth by any means necessary. So yeah, I will admit, whenever you look at the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, it takes place in this timeline as well, but it's basically what Russia gave up in World War I whenever they surrendered to Germany. The Soviet gains in this war were pretty big. If they got Belarus, Ukraine, and the Baltic states, that brings them up to basically territorial, not territorial, historical Soviet borders, like World War II-esque style. So it is quite a bit of territory, but I don't really think we should be going, yeah, this war ended in a defeat for our side. That's probably not great. So we're just going to commend the German people for successfully fending off the Red Colossus, while also talking about, how our arms and ammunition helped. Drawing a straight line between this positive outcome and your own recent actions can't be a bad thing. Alright, so December 13th, 1921, as crop and livestock prices continue to fall from their great war heights, a coalition of conservative House Republicans and Democrats have passed the Agricultural Austerity Act, legislation which would impose a new statutory ceiling on the amount of Department of Agriculture farm subsidies equal to half of the level allowed by the Farm Relief Act of 1917. With the debate over the bill in the Republican-controlled Senate looming, Senate Majority Leader Charles Curtis, who, fun fact about him, historically was Herbert Hoover's vice president, and if I'm correct, I believe he was the first Native American vice president. So, kind of a cool guy. He's seeking to gauge our position on this piece of legislation. So, yeah, with crop and livestock prices falling, this kind of just happens, it seems, after every war, so we probably do need to find a way to stabilize it rather than just cutting the subsidies. So we can't just sign it without, trying to get something. But also we can't really veto it, because agricultural subsidies are more so a Bryan thing, and this is a austerity act, so canonically, we need to pass some type of austerity act. And also, it's a Republican bill. We can't be striking down our party's own legislation. But we do need to amend it. So the two amendments are, this bill will only receive my signature if it is paired with a 5% increase on tariffs on agricultural products. It is wishful thinking to expect already struggling farmers to weather subsidy reductions without some form of enhanced protection. So that would kind of align with, the fact that he's governing in an orthodox manner, which includes higher tariffs, since that's a typical Republican stance. Or we can only sign this if it includes Senator McNary's proposed relief amendment, replacing the Department of Agriculture's current subsidy regime with a new agency authorized to buy and sell surplus crops on international markets, and would result in a net decrease of federal spending. I think out of the two, because I don't think a 5% increase on tariff is going to do that much. That might be the more canonical option, but I actually think I'm going to go with Senator McNary's proposed relief amendment, because I don't think it breaks the canon route of this timeline all that much. And I think this Department of Agriculture change actually has quite a bit of potential, especially with stopping the farmers from struggling. So we're going to sign that version. Curtis and other farm state conservatives remain uncomfortable with the market interventionism agricultural relief policies entail, but still prefer this augmentation over the status quo. Senator Charles McNary's version of the Agricultural Austerity Act passes in early January, somewhat softening rural America's landing from the post-war farm crisis. So that's what we wanted. Now which states do we want to win over? Well, Missouri. Missouri's got the most electoral votes out of those competitive states. So, January 24th, 1922, fresh off a series of conservative victories on tariffs and the tax code, Pennsylvania Representative Anderson Howell Walters proposed omnibus legislation repealing various labor protections established by former President Theodore Roosevelt's New Nationalism and William Jennings Bryan's Common Prosperity, garnering the broad support of the Congressional Conservative Coalition. With the Walters bill at your desk for signature, how will you proceed? So we know from the summary that this bill is going to get vetoed by Leonard Wood in the canon route because we're still keeping the progressive protections for labor. So we're not going to sign it. So yeah, no way are we signing it. We could kill it with the January recess and a pocket veto, but it's a little bit weak. We could also, like not sign it because it would smear Roosevelt's legacy. But the thing is that I'm not sure how popular Roosevelt is in this timeline, because in this timeline he brings the U.S. into the World War I early, and then loses because that war obviously didn't quite go the way people were hoping it would in this timeline. It ended in a stalemate because America withdrew early. Because fun fact, there's not a lot of progress whenever trench warfare is a thing. So I don't think we should evoke Roosevelt's legacy, considering he's probably just too unpopular to really do that. Or, to hell with the consequences, I'm vetoing this bill to protect the health and general welfare of American laborers. Hoover can embark on a goodwill tour of sorts to smooth over business opposition in the meantime. So I think that's the best route to go. We make our veto clear, we get labor support, and Hoover smooths out things with the business. So I think that's the best route to go with. Congressional conservatives are taken aback by your willingness to preserve progressive labor standards, but Hoover does a fine job massaging the concerns of the national business community. So yeah, that's exactly what we wanted. Whoops. I think our next state we want to take is Nebraska. So, March 7th, 1922, as tensions cool in Europe and the legislative flurry of your first year in office winds down, it finally seems opportune to pursue your formal cooperation with Western European democracies to contain Bolshevik expansion. With dignitaries of Britain, France, Italy, and Germany set to converge on Washington for an international disarmament conference, who will you select to serve as your lead delegate during planned backroom negotiations? So, let's see, who are our options? Henry L. Stimson is a keystone of Republican cabinets of the past and Secretary of State. No one better suited to the task at hand. Edward M. House is a Democrat. Served as Texas Senator Charles A. Culberson's chief of staff and has earned a reputation as a deft negotiator. Elijah Root is an elder statesman at the talks and has an expertise in both military and international affairs. And Charles J. Not J, that's a G. I don't know why I thought that's a J. Sorry. Charles G. Dawes. And his financial acumen is exactly what we need at a bargaining table, especially if we are to settle the issue of outstanding war debts, which would be a big thing in this timeline since neither side won the war and neither side could get war reparations from the other. So everyone would just be owing war debts. So he's a very solid option. Rue, if I'm correct, is an isolationist, so we probably don't want to be sending him to internationalist meetings. We do need a good negotiator, considering this alliance is, not swell, considering 3 of those people were just fighting Germany. Or, well, they aren't people, but, 3 of those nations just, within recent memory got out of a war with Germany, so there's going to still be tensions there, so House would be good as well. As would Stimson. Hmm. I don't feel like we can send a Democrat. I think that gives the Democrats an advantage, so we can't send him. Stimson doesn't really have anything that sets him apart, so we're going to go with Dawes. Dawes graciously accepts this position, but announcing the elevation of a prominent financier. Sorry. I'm filming this late at night and my pronunciation is not the greatest, if you couldn't tell. But promoting him provides your critics, including Democratic Senator James A. Reed of Missouri, an opening to loudly accuse you of cronyism. Okay, well, whatever. I don't really care what Reed's saying. Apparently he isn't the most popular anyway. But we do need to solidify our support in Missouri. So May 29th, 1922, British, French, Italian, and German dignitaries have agreed to convene in a plain conference room in Washington's Memorial Constitution Hall to discuss the prospect of multilateral anti-communist security cooperation. How should Dawes introduce and define your administration's planned arrangement? So, a grand bargain, a gradual process of transatlantic defense collaboration, explicitly conditioned on repayment of great war debts would allow all powers involved to benefit, except it wouldn't because nobody can pay those debts, so this just fails. The League of Nations, which historically failed so miserably that it collapsed within 20-ish years. It collapsed whenever the Soviets invaded Finland in 1940, I believe. So yeah, the League of Nations was a worthless organization. No way am I ever gonna back that. Not to mention that was Woodrow Wilson's idea, so that was a Democrat thing. We aren't touching it. The Atlantic Front is an establishment of a defensive alliance guaranteeing the sovereignty of all members, which would deter Soviet adventurism by making a Bolshevik attack on one partner an attack on all. That's a little bit too aggressive. And furthermore, we can't really choose any of these because the canonical route is the Quintet Pact, which is a broad agreement declaring signatories' common opposition to Bolshevism, including a commitment among the nations involved to convene regularly to determine effective responses to red aggression, foreign and domestic. So that's the canon route. It's a pretty big thing, and it just seems like the best out of all of them. French Ambassador Jules Josserand protests the flimsiness of this proposed treaty at first, but the affirmations of the other four powers eventually pressure the French delegation to accept the Quintet Pact's framework. Your domestic critics, however, mostly succeed in characterizing this agreement as a costly, entangling alliance. Kinda sucks, but oh well. So, July 5th, 1922, a nationwide strike by 7 railway unions representing 400,000 shop and maintenance workers, brought on by a 12% wage cut approved by the Railroad Labor Board, has ground the national economy to a halt for 4 straight days, with armed clashes between armed company guards and strikers appearing increasingly likely. Attorney General William Howard Taft, former president, and a Supreme Court justice, neat little fact about William Howard Taft, is advising you to take action. How will you intervene? So, let's see. Hoover has convinced me to proceed with a light touch. I'll use the bully pulpit to propose a sweeping agreement reducing work hours while maintaining current wage cuts. I feel like that might just antagonize both sides. I mean, Hoover probably knows what he's doing, but I am a little bit worried about it. Political realities necessitate a punitive response. Taft ought to denounce the strikers as agents of Moscow, and army units should be widely deployed to protect railroad assets. I feel like that one's a little too harsh against the strikers. The Railroad Labor Board should retroactively reduce this wage cut to 3 cents an hour while designating replacement workers permanent. Taft can appoint scores of deputy U.S. Marshals to protect the railroad's assets from sabotage, but should generally restrain himself. That one just doesn't seem like it'll work. I think that would just irritate all sides if we designated replacement workers while forcing, the company to reduce the wage cuts. That's like saying screw you to the strikers and then turning around and saying screw you to the businessmen. So that one isn't ideal. A situation requires a two-track approach. Taft ought to pursue a nationwide injunction against the strikers while the Railroad Labor Board forces the railroads and labor unions into arbitration. That could be okay, but forcing an injunction kind of just kicks the can down the road, and there's no guarantee that arbitration would work. We might want to just go with Hoover. I think he might know what he's doing. Hopefully. Oh, your attempts to reach a grand bargain fall flat as the railroads outright refuse to make concessions. The Great Railroad Strike of 1922 drags on for 3 months, killing 25 and slowing the pace of economic recovery, demolishing your competent persona in the eyes of many Americans. That is less than ideal, I suppose. Or not even suppose, no, that's just flat out less than ideal. So I want to make sure I've got Missouri, though. So, January 8th, 1923, appearing uncharacteristically flustered, Secretary of State Henry L. Stimson asked to meet with you in private. Mere hours ago, French Prime Minister Raymond Poincaré subjected Ambassador Myron T. Herrick to a tongue lashing, launching into a tirade decrying his country's ongoing financial crisis and France's lack of security assurances vis-a-vis Germany. How will you address this potential diplomatic fracas? So that's a two-pronged issue of both the war debts and France's, hatred for Germany at the time. Let's see. Name me a time when the French were not frightened by Teutonic shadows, and I will eat my hat. We shall issue a pat pronouncement encouraging American private lenders to revise wartime loan agreements in a manner friendly to Paris, but should not otherwise assign Poincaré's outbursts any undue importance. Firm alliance commitments are not in the cards, especially as 1924 nears. I'm confident the staging of joint exercises between our troops and an Anglo-French attachment, along with my personal presence abroad, will be enough to assuage Poincaré's fears. The root cause is the debt obligations. Treasury Secretary Vanderbilt should nationalize all wartime loans and issue an indefinite moratorium on interest payments, or we will not accept renewed Franco-German tensions and strife. There ought to be a multilateral conference held to reconcile Paris and Berlin with the British and Italians' position as the guarantors of the European order established at Maisons Lafayette, which is the canonical treaty in this alternate timeline that ends World War I. It's the one that establishes just basically a stalemate. So if we nationalize the wartime debts, that's just gonna tick off everyone in the business community, is basically saying, yeah, you loaned out all your money to the French, you're not getting that money back. So that won't work. Staging joint exercises between our troops and an Anglo-French detachment would, I think, make Germany a little bit too nervous around us, and that would be an issue considering they're part of our alliance against Bolshevism. So I don't really want to be doing a military demonstration directed at, borderline threatening one of our allies. We could do a conference, but I don't know if that's realistic to actually work, considering it's more of a cultural divide rather than just, a political one. So I think we just should encourage American private lenders to revise wartime loan agreements, but ignore it other than that. I don't think there's a good enough solution. Your assumptions prove to be accurate. Poincaré continues to fume about Germany's potential resurgence, but realizes he is in no position to unilaterally extort Berlin, especially as transatlantic diplomacy provides London an outlet to deepen its perfidy. Meanwhile, your lack of concrete action denies your domestic critics a new route of attack. Hey, that works. Why did I lose support for that? Okay, sure. Alright, September 17, 1923. Republican Representative Leonidas Dyer of Missouri has fought a lengthy war of attrition to secure passage of an expansive anti-lynching bill. His Dyer anti-lynching bill deems an action on the part of state officials to disrupt mob executions a felony and grants federal court jurisdiction to try those implicated in lynching. After passing the House by a wide margin, the Dyer bill has languished in the Senate due to the persistent opposition of Southern Democrats. As this legislation enters its second prolonged filibuster, and Dyer pressures you to weigh in, how will you proceed? So I definitely want to get this bill passed. It's a key achievement of his in the summary. Not to mention, preventing lynching is, fun fact, a good thing to do. The fact that it was legal for a time after the Civil War is honestly just embarrassing to America, but yeah, so we have to find a way to get this done. Let's see. I plan to give a speech from the days of Philadelphia's Mother Bethel African Methodist Church pledging my full support for the Dyer Bill. May God allow the legislator's gavel to expunge centuries of American sin. That's okay. It's not likely to, sway any side. I mean, we need to actually get the opposition over to pass the bill, pass the filibuster. So I think giving a speech in support of it won't do that much. We only have to sway 9 senators, 4 of them Republicans, to invoke cloture. If that means pledging executive noncompliance behind closed doors, so be it. This bill is doomed. Supporting it at this juncture would only associate me with its failure while rallying the heartland against us in the coming election. We only have to sway 9 senators to invoke cloture. I am certain we can convince Northern Democrats to support the bill by including a rider cutting funding for the Bureau of Prohibition. So yeah, prohibition would be a thing at this time, but honestly, it seems like almost everyone is dry, and I don't even think it's a big enough issue to actually get people to sway over to our side. We can't just not support it. I don't think giving a speech in support of it will work. I think our best course of action is probably the backroom deal, I guess. While you've all but gutted the Dyer bill with this massive concession, an eclectic group of 9 Northern Democrats and segregationist-leaning progressives agree to vote in favor of cloture. He signed the Dyer Anti-Lynching Act into law in early October, horrifying much of rural America and permanently endearing you to many civil rights leaders. So that's what we wanted. Oh my gosh. Why was saying no to lynching that unpopular? Jeez, okay. Alright, December 23rd, 1923. Governor of the Federal Reserve Board, William P.G. Harding's 6-year term is about to expire. Fun fact, or I think, yeah, that should be the same person. Yeah, but Harding, if I'm correct about which Harding it is, I think I am. He was also historically a U.S. president. Had the Teapot Dome scandal and then died of a heart attack. His vice president was Calvin Coolidge, who then became president. So that was Harding, if I'm correct about it. I think that's the same Harding, hopefully. Feel free to fact check me on that, but I do know there was a Harding. I think it was Warren G. Harding, I want to say, but yeah. Please fact check me on that, but I do know we had a Harding as president and thought that was kind of a neat fact. So, we ought to renominate him. If he is the same Harding, I don't want that type of corruption anywhere near the Federal Reserve Board. George L. Harrison has raised valid concerns about the unsustainability of an economic recovery built on rampant speculation. I don't think so. Here's the thing: is that we're currently in the 1920s, and the economy would be getting better. And historically, you have the Roaring 20s where the economy looks really good. Of course, it was built on very shaky foundation that then collapsed and then triggered the Great Depression. So objectively, George L. Harrison is probably the best to appoint. But the issue is that if the economy looks good right now and then we appoint someone who's like, actually, the economy isn't that good, it's going to trigger backlash. Roy A. Young has a preference for strengthening the wider banking system over tinkering with economic stability and makes him our safest option. Or Benjamin Strong has an enhanced understanding of international finance and continued advocacy for interaction with the open markets merits official recognition. Well, I think George L. Harrison is probably the best objectively. I think Benjamin Strong is the next best thing, and I think more palpable to the public at this time, especially since international finance has been such a big thing, so we're going to go with him. Strong implements a robust mechanism for buying and selling government securities in the open market. This open market investment committee manages to lower interest rates more substantively heading into the 1924 election season, further stimulating the roaring economy with easy credit. Okay, I think that works. Definitely works. Wow, that swayed most of the states back over to me. Alright, so March 13th, 1924. A months-long standoff in Berlin concludes at last. Following a resounding victory in January snap elections, a right-wing anti-communist coalition composed of the German National People's Party, the Volksfreedom Party, and the National Socialist German Workers' Party, shortened to Nazi, coalesced around the leadership of 34-year-old former Deutsche Heer Corporal Adolf Hitler. With the Reichstag deadlocked, President Paul von Hindenburg ruled with emergency powers for 2 months until the German Reform Party reluctantly transformed Hitler's plurality into a working majority. As of this afternoon, Herr Hitler is officially the new Chancellor of the German Republic. So that's a little bit concerning, and definitely a lot earlier than it was historically. So it's interesting how it kind of mirrors history, because historically, Hitler does get democratically elected as chancellor, under President Paul von Hindenburg's term. Hindenburg, for some reason, believed he could puppet Hitler, which obviously didn't work out. I know the two didn't really like each other all that much, but yeah. Hindenburg still did allow Hitler to get power. And then I know the German parliament after World War I historically had some serious issues. Like, everyone was just calling snap elections to try to get majorities, and then that would collapse whatever plurality they had. And then, yeah, Germany after World War I was a mess, so I'm assuming something similar is going on here, which would allow Hitler to seize power. But yeah, definitely not ideal. So I respect the will of the German people and send their new chancellor my congratulations. Nope, not a shot. Not congratulating Hitler. I am pleased to see Germany guided by a man of firm anti-Bolshevik constitution. Chancellor Hitler's presence will significantly bolster both European and American security for years to come. No, it won't. Hitler is insane. No way am I going to actually praise him for that. Yeah. Hitler seems as bitter as he is untested. I do sincerely hope the trials of leadership encourage restraint and cooperation in the arena of foreign affairs. Yeah, I'm just going to criticize him. No way am I, issuing some non-political statement or even going so far as to, say that that's a good thing. It's Hitler. Nothing about him is good. While harsh, your cold reception of the young chancellor places you in Hindenburg's good graces without leaving room for isolationist jabs. Hitler fumes in Berlin, but the German president's active role in foreign policy makes this a good bet. So hey, doing the right thing actually benefits in politics. At least in this case. Don't think that's always the case, considering I had to pledge non-compliance to a bill to get it signed in this election, but oh well. Alright, as you accept your party's presidential nomination for a second time at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, and the identity of your Democratic opponent remains a mystery, what will you say to the cheering crowd before you? We have soared higher than ever with our bellies full, our pockets deep, and our streets tranquil. Another term of competence will sustain our march onwards and upwards. That one works. But let's see. I'm grateful to be addressing such a unified and animated party. In contrast to our friends across the aisle, all Republicans can agree on the common virtue of limiting the arrival of foreigners, because, for some reason, xenophobia was really common at this time. Protecting American laborers and curbing illicit consumption of alcohol. None of those are really appealing other than protecting American laborers. Stability begets stagnation if taken for granted. As a party of Lincoln and Roosevelt, we must ensure equality and prosperity for all at home while simultaneously warding off adventurism abroad. That one's a bit too progressive, especially for this time period. In 1920 and 1924, you got like the return to normalcy movement, which is kind of where the progressive movement ended because people wanted to just kind of return to like a status quo of sorts. So I would say, let's see. And the other one is, I pledge to maintain strict adherence to our nation's founding principles. America has become freer and more faithful to its original values under my leadership. In our economy's strong recovery proves this country prospers most when private enterprises given ample room to innovate. We could say that. That one's a pretty good pro-business one. That kind of, champions the current market. Or we can just, say that we're gonna keep, stay the course in a way, I think that one might be the best. The Cleveland Public Auditorium rises to its feet. With the economy as strong as it is, an uplifting, uncontroversial campaign focused on your achievements may be your easiest path to re-election. Hopefully. So the old guard of the Republican Party has seen its power diluted by a new generation of conservative congressional leaders, but still wields considerable influence over the national party apparatus and remains a reliable source of campaign contributions. The old guard's proxy of choice, chairman of the Republican National Committee, William M. Butler, has arranged a private conference to discuss your economic platform and ensure your second term preserves the fiscally conservative agenda of your first. How will you proceed? So, let's see. I cannot afford to be seen as a puppet of Wall Street. I pledge to preserve my first term agenda, but will otherwise campaign on enhanced antitrust measures, agrarian unemployment programs, and more robust federal business regulation. I've had enough of the hullabaloo surrounding my loyalty to conservative orthodoxy. Not only am I a broadly popular incumbent, but one who has helped shepherd tax cuts, tariff increases, and immigration restrictions through Congress. Or I will sign on to anything which strengthens the party come November, exchanging further rollback of federal regulatory power for another term of stifled red aggression in Europe seems a fair bargain. Don't think we need to do that. We're still winning. Wish we had a larger margin of winning, but that's just because I'm greedy. I don't think we need to, kowtow to the conservative base. But also I don't want to antagonize them, so I'm just going to say, yeah, I'm a broadly popular incumbent, and I've helped shepherd tax cuts, tariff increases, and immigration restrictions. So we're just going to say that. Butler stares at you icily, but his cold gaze doesn't make you any less correct. Your leverage as a well-regarded, conservative-leaning incumbent allows you to breeze through this meeting without clearly favoring either wing of the party. Which was exactly what I wanted. Kentucky's looking a little bit unstable in terms of my base of support, so I'm going to head to Kentucky. Now, after 15 days of balloting in an implacable deadlock between West Virginia Senator John W. Davis, who, if I'm correct, actually ran historically in the 1924 election. So he was the actual, presidential nominee historically in 1924. And New York Governor Al Smith, who is also a Democratic presidential nominee in 1928, who lost to Herbert Hoover. Fun fact about both of them. The Democratic National Convention has stunningly nominated fiery conservative Senator James A. Reed of Missouri for the presidential ticket. How will you augment your campaign after hearing news of this unexpected development? So, we cannot afford to underestimate Reed's impressive abilities as a firebrand. I'll deliver a series of speeches across the Upper South to match his energy. I don't think we really need to do that. Reed is as controversial as they come. Let's approach J.P. Morgan Jr. and commit to a hard line on French war debts in exchange for raising alarm about Reed's more populist positions within the Democratic donor class. Don't think we need that. Most of the business people are on our side anyway. It appears God is a loyal Republican. We shall proceed according to plan and watch Reed's ill-conceived campaign immolate itself. That one's a valid tragedy considering what I know of, James A. Reed from this game. Or Reed is as controversial as they come. Let's cobble together an informal task force of party operatives dedicated to leaking evidence of his past gaffes, ideological inconsistencies, and esoteric positions to any reporter within sight. I honestly think that's the best route to go. Affectionately dubbed the Abtalung Boys after a bizarre 1916 memo authored by many of the task force current members that Roosevelt once jokingly showed you, this group successfully floods national newspapers with negative coverage of Reed's past at the outset of the election season, solidifying his reputation as an extremist. Perfect. Why did him being an extremist somehow win him 3 states? Okay, sure, we can get those back. Alright. Progressive backlash against James A. Reed's nomination has culminated in a separate Progressive Party convention, headlined by its presumptive nominee, Democratic Senator Burton K. Wheeler of Montana. Unfortunately for you, many progressive Republicans are beginning to see this as an opportunity to register their disapproval of your administration's conservative shift. One such progressive, Senator Hiram Johnson of California, is rumored to be at the top of Wheeler's running mate shortlist. With Johnson's potential selection threatening party unity, what will you do to keep him in line? So, Wheeler is... Nope, not Wheeler. Sorry, got them mixed up. Hiram Johnson is a key progressive Republican, and we didn't get his endorsement whenever we ran the Cannon route in 1916, and that really hurt us, I think. So I really want to get his endorsement here, and I don't want him to bolt to the Progressive Party, especially since the Progressive Party historically typically roams around out here where my support is already shaky. So I cannot be letting the liberal and progressive Republicans bolt to the progressive ticket. We have to keep them on board. So, concerning his behavior during the 1916 campaign, which, as I mentioned, I ran as the Democratic nominee in that 1916 B election, and Johnson did nearly endorse him, so it's pretty clear that Johnson isn't the most loyal Republican. Still don't want to tell him good riddance, though. Like I said, we can't afford to lose his support. We ought to arrange a private meeting with Johnson, but Hoover will be attending in my stead. He should present himself as a disguised progressive influence on my administration. No, that won't work. Hoover's, a businessman and is very popular with the business wing of the party. That will not work. We can't suddenly be like, oh, he's a progressive in disguise. Especially whenever Hoover is, very well known for favoring laissez-faire economics. Let's see. We ought to arrange a private meeting with Johnson. I shall promise to submit all current and future executive agreements with foreign powers to senatorial advice and consent. Not going to do that. I don't think foreign affairs are Johnson's, pet issue, as they call them. I shall commit to increasing the current income tax rate on earners over $100,000 from 30 to 40%. That would be something Johnson would want, since that is a progressive piece of legislation. So we're going to offer our support of that. This bargain satisfies Johnson and the majority of Republican progressives. Burton K. Wheeler accepts the Progressive Party's nomination for president on July 25th, selecting Republican Senator George W. Norris of Nebraska as his running mate. Reed, meanwhile, makes headway with conservatives by slamming your concessions. Which, yikes, that's rough. I mean, fair enough, I suppose. I did concede a lot to the progressives, but dang, that hurt. Not unwinnable, though. I think we can turn this around. Let's get Ohio back on our side. So prohibition continues to be a hot-button issue which divides both major parties internally. Well-connected conservative president of Columbia University, Nicholas Emery Butler, came into verbal combat with progressive Senator William E. Borah of Idaho by calling for relaxed enforcement of the Volstead Act at this year's convention. After equivocating on the issue last election cycle, how will you define your official stance? Simply not an issue of the executive branch. Debate over the 18th Amendment ought to be confined to state legislatures and the halls of Congress. I'm inclined to support Butler's stance. Prohibition hasn't accomplished anything besides strengthening crime syndicates and allowing federal agents to needlessly intrude in American daily life. So that part is true. Prohibition did increase crime because, nobody wanted to give up alcohol, so they just turned towards the mafia to get it. So prohibition objectively is typically considered to, have failed miserably and not be a good thing. But it seems like most people at this time are still willing to try it, so I don't want to come out against it. Or So we can I don't want to support the dry faction, and I don't want to support the wet faction. Especially considering New York's looking shaky and they're, in the wet faction. So but let's see. Let's relentlessly attack Reed for his past wet stances to put him in an inescapable bind in the heartland. I think that's probably the best thing to do. While this does nothing to resolve the Butler-Borah split within the party, pressing Reed on his politically expedient shift from wet to dry certainly does him no favors. Does seem to have gotten me back a couple of states. Ohio's back, and I think we can get Indiana shortly. So West Virginia Senator John W. Davis has demonstrated himself to be an inauspicious choice of running mate for your main opponent. While addressing a crowd of Kansas and Topeka, Davis called for maintenance of our international relationships at all costs, stirring up controversy in national columns about the Democrats' divergent views on foreign policy. How will you comment? A simple job application would suffice, but Davis has our attention. Stimson tells me there is an entry-level position open at our embassy in Caracas if the Honorable Senator ever wants a change of scenery. Don't think he's going to take that, so we're not going to bother. No comment. That doesn't really get us anywhere. I am certain Reed and Davis's disagreements extend beyond international affairs. How can Reed rail against new nationalism, which is, Theodore Roosevelt's agenda in this timeline for his third campaign? And it is actually what he ran on in the 1912 election historically. How can Reed rail against new nationalism while his own running mate co-authored the Clayton Antitrust Act, which is, a progressive piece of legislation? So we're going to say that one. Reed's staunchest opponents applaud your willingness to go for the jugular, but these unabashed attacks slightly harm your respectability in the eyes of the greater public. Still does seem to kind of be swaying some people over. Maybe. We do need Ohio back, though. As your lead widens, Vice President Herbert Hoover has offered his services as a campaigner. How will you utilize his presence on the campaign trail? The sheer volume of our main opponent's attacks warrant a response, but I cannot afford to roll in the mud personally. Hoover should join himself at the hip to a plethora of reporters and present cognate responses to Reed's hot air as it comes. His early progressive streak could be an untapped asset. Hoover ought to hop between agrarian communities and mill towns across the Upper South and Midwest, highlighting the Wood administration's commitment to giving the common farmer and laborer a fair shake. His talents are most appreciated in the boardroom. Let's have Hoover cozy up to a number of isolationist-leaning business tycoons and attempt to convince some of the financial merits of 4 more years of Republican leadership. Or Hoover's illustrious personal reputation and rapport with the average voter are his real strength. He ought to embark on a whistle-stop tour from New York to San Francisco, touting the success of our first-term economic agenda all along the way. So Hoover does have a pretty cool story, but I don't know if it's the route we want to go down. I also don't necessarily want him just, always talking to reporters. I actually think we might want to try to get him to win over the business wing. Especially since that's like his real skill set. So we're gonna try that and see if we can just flood out Reed with money. Through a series of handshake promises to augment federal regulatory authority in various sectors, Hoover successfully chokes off many potential revenue sources for Reed's campaign, including powerful industrialist Henry Ford, contributing further to his downward spiral. I'm not saying this downward spiral you're talking so much about, game, but it better come soon. So, since the beginning of his campaign, James A. Reed has repeatedly branded you a bigwig among bigwigs. His colorful descriptions of galas with New York socialites and backroom dealings with the international elite have swayed many rural voters otherwise resistant to his brand of conservatism. How will you push back against Reed's accusation as you campaign? This is low-grade mudslinging, plain and simple. Let's continue pressing our message. Nope, his mudslinging is working, so we need to address it. These allegations are as preposterous as they are baseless. I began my career in public service as a lowly army surgeon, and to this day find myself searching for the door when men of great wealth seek my attention. If you want evidence of cronyism, look no further than Reed's own campaign. The man is taking marching orders from Kansas City machine boss T.J. Pendergast and hobnobbing with John Raskob at every opportunity. Or Reed's ultra-conservative platform entails the greatest empowerment of corporate interests in the history of our republic. These barbs are nothing but a smokescreen for the ambitions of Democrat money managers. I think we should probably just address these allegations with our Army service, especially since that was Wood's claim to fame in the 1920 B election. So we're gonna go with that. You endear many with your honest remarks, however disingenuous they may be, shaking off the effects of Reed's attacks outside of his core base of support. That's great. We're still not getting our states back, though. French Prime Minister Raymond Poincare's anxiety over Adolf Hitler's rise to the German chancellery has reached a fever pitch. Amidst renewed tensions, Britain's new Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary Ramsay MacDonald has called for a transatlantic conference at Dresden to reassure Paris. Will you send Secretary of State Henry L. Stimson to attend? Stimson ought to be in attendance. We must demonstrate that petty domestic politics won't distract our attention from the maintenance of a free and prosperous Europe. I believe we can afford to leave this one to the Europeans. I don't think so. Stimson ought to be in attendance. His presence should be mostly ceremonial, leaving the nitty-gritty diplomacy to MacDonald. Or Stimson should be in attendance. He should attempt to establish close ties to Hitler to clear. Yeah, we're not gonna be trying to pursue close ties with Hitler. But I do think America, seemingly in this timeline, is turning more towards isolationism. So I think we need to probably be there, but have it mostly be ceremonial, so that way we don't get wrapped up in any more foreign affairs. MacDonald manages to goad Hitler, with Hindenburg over his shoulder, into renewing German commitment to pass international agreements. After Simpson poses front and center for a widely publicized group photograph in Dresden, Reed excoriates the conference's resolution as another no-strings-attached agreement. I mean, that didn't go quite as planned. We're still losing. How would you like to attack Reed as you campaign this fall? My opponent's extreme prejudice knows no bounds. Reed has ridiculed women and blacks with language unbecoming of a potential chief executive, even going so far as to demean both groups' right to vote. Reed's willful ignorance in the field of international relations mirrors that of Bryan. I think that one we probably don't want to go with, especially if America is leaning isolationist. We must maintain an air of positivity. The booming economy cannot be nullified by even spitting Jim's most creative verbal joust. An uplifting campaign will make the contrast between our temperaments clear as day. Or Reed has the most atrocious voting record in the Senate. He has voted against immigration restrictions, benefits for working mothers, and the 19th Amendment. It terrifies one to imagine what he would do with the power of the veto. I think that's the best attack we can do against him. It's like that one about, his prejudice, but even better. Calling attention to Reed's unpopular conduct as a senator is a good way to put him on the defensive and further burnish his reputation as an extremist. Now that does seem to be winning us over some support. How would you like to attack Wheeler as you campaign this fall? Let's see. So, Wheeler doesn't actually seem to... Well, no, he's actually got a couple states up north. Yeah, we do need to attack him. I don't think we can afford to ignore him. So, we ought to leave him be. Nope. His interest is not mainly confined to the left flank of the Democrat Party. He's taken a lot of liberal Republicans. Wheeler is a traitorous Bolshevik operative. Nationalizing railroads and basic natural resources are positions ripped straight from the declaration of the creation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Or Wheeler is simply too radical. His plan to empower labor unions would undermine an economy that already works. That doesn't sound too radical enough to convince his voters. And calling him a communist is something. I don't think that's the way to go. Each vote for the progressive ticket brings Reed closer to the White House. This immature revolt merely empowers his arch-conservative movement. I think that's probably the best one we want to do, just to, try and rally against Reed. Many progressives find this message unconvincing due to your large lead and continue to feel comfortable registering their discomfort with the increasing conservatism of both parties. Excuse me? What lead? I'm losing the election. I mean, not by much, but, still. I'm not in a large lead. But, let's see. And yet another positive development for your campaign, a copy of a 1919 letter written by Reed to former governor of New Jersey and unsuccessful 1912 Democratic presidential nominee Woodrow Wilson, who historically won the election and was a two-term president that brought us through World War I, and, is also in the running for the worst president America has ever had. Democratic president Reed refers to the un-American cauldron as a conglomerate of the... Oh my gosh, that's so mind-numbingly racist, I don't know if I can read that. Though then again, I just talk at length about Hitler, but still, don't want to risk that. Just, you can read it. Very racist, though. The Wilson letter, published in yesterday's New York World, is seriously harming Reed's standing nationwide. How will you react? I always thought Wilson's greatest achievement was losing to the Colonel, but this takes the cake. We shall remain silent and bid Reed's campaign farewell. Or Reed's extremism is now on full display. Any good American ought to be deeply concerned with these bigoted remarks. I honestly think it's best to just let him sit back and let him shoot himself in the foot. since political attacks aren't quite in style at this time. Yeah, allowing Reed's final collapse to unfold on its own is your best bet. Ah, there's our lead back. Alright. Doesn't seem like I'm going to get too many states back. I'm going to try to go for Minnesota. So, with Reed still bleeding from the widespread publication of the Wilson letter and Stimson warning of you concerning intelligence from the State Department's Black Chamber indicating a buildup of French forces along the northeastern segment of the Franco-German border, will you fulfill the contents of your... No, I will not. We need all hands on deck for the coming storm. Yes, I will. The French are merely bluffing, and pressing our current advantage in the Midwest will expand upon my second-term mandate. I'm going to really be hoping that the French are bluffing on this, because if not, it's going to backfire horrendously. So we're going to go out west. Nope. Alright. You wade into a cheering mob of supporters in San Francisco, shaking hands and kissing infants as they pass into your arms. National commentators have mostly abandoned coverage of the presidential contest, as it seems all but certain you will be reelected in a landslide. That's good. October 31st, 1924. The world holds its breath as French troops cross into the Rhineland. French Premier Raymond Poincaré has announced demands for reparations in kind and monetary restitution from Germany to resolve his country's ongoing coal shortage and financial crisis. German President Paul von Hindenburg's refusal to declare war in retaliation, stating the importance of intervention by the international community. The latest reports indicate that French and German soldiers are engaged in skirmishes across the Saarland. Oh no. Dear God, Henry, I never thought it would be possible to underestimate the French. That is not good. The opening stages of the Rheinkampf shock the international community and create an upwelling of isolationist sentiment at home. Reed capitalizes on the crisis to whip up war hysteria in the press, and many Americans see their worst fears of American involvement in another European conflict on the verge of coming true. Oh my gosh. I see. That is, we're the campaign in the last week before Election Day. I just don't think it matters. Yeah. Wow, that was, bad. Guess we'll go through the Midwest, but I did not expect that. I was really hoping the French were bluffing, and I figured after, the answer didn't immediately explode in my face that would be the end of it. But, I guess not. I was not figuring that the French were going to invade Germany. That was not on my to-do list for 1924B, but I guess here we are. Yeah. In American Croesus, this phrase tops H.L. Mencken's column in the American Mercury, a biting allusion to the Median king who misinterpreted an oracle's prophecy and destroyed his empire at the hands of Cyrus the Great in the process. Cyrus the Great is the founder of the Persian Empire. Fun fact about him. Despite all of your attempts to prevent another war in Europe, it appears you have inadvertently created one and gone the way of this pitied king of antiquity. In what essayist F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote The Great Gatsby, described as a good rock of the cradle, resentment of your internationalist foreign policy came to the forefront of national consciousness after France's foray into the Rhineland, affording your opponents a shocking amount of momentum going into Election Day. Like Roosevelt and Bryan before you, developments overseas have denied you a second term in the White House. While your political career is certainly over, you can at least take solace in Reed's difficult future. Facing Republican majorities in Congress, looming reapportionment, and crises abroad, his path to re-election will be exceedingly narrow. His challenger in 1928 will likely be someone far removed from your administration as to avoid association with your foreign policy record. The Isolationist Bora and Moderate Loudon have already been floated as potential candidates. Enjoy your retirement in the meantime, and hopefully your brain tumor doesn't return until after your defeat is vindicated. Yikes. That is supposed to, I think, be what the map is. Presumably. I think that's what the canon map is supposed to be, so, yeah, definitely did not get the canon ending, but I got the worst possible ending for, Wood. Yikes, I mean, at the very least, we outperformed Wheeler, but not by much. Anyway, I guess that's, 1924B election. If you guys enjoyed, like and subscribe. If you didn't, comment down below you know better, and I will see you guys in the next video.